And joining us now is Robert Compton, executive producer of the documentary 2 Million Minutes. I haven't got 2 million for you tonight, but we'll spend about 15 talking about your documentary, if that's okay.
Okay, great.
Welcome to Toronto. It's nice
Thank
to
you.
have you here. Let's show a clip for those who haven't seen your documentary so they get a sense about what we're talking about here. You followed 6 students in 3 different countries, and you came up with some pretty amazing findings. Roll tape, please.
The American education system is broken.
How a student spends their time during high school affects their entire economic future. And by extension, a country's economic future is dependent on how its students collectively spend those valuable high school minutes.
Well, obviously, if the world is completely flat and the people in India and China are lower wages and are just as good as us, we are in a real problem.
Let's talk about those students from India, China, and Indiana, Middle America,
Okay,
right?
yes.
Who's spending the most time in the classroom of those groups?
Of the 3 groups, the Chinese spend the most time in the classroom. They go to school 10 months out of the year. They have 9-hour days and typically 6-day weeks. The Indians would be second, and then the Americans would be a bit of a distant third.
Who's doing the most homework?
The Chinese would be doing the most homework, followed by Indians, and then the Americans.
Who's working the hardest?
Well, working the hardest on academics.
Yes.
I would say it's the Chinese and Indians both work very, very intensely because of their culture, values, intellectual achievement. They value academic achievement. There's a lot of peer and parental pressure to achieve. But I would say American students work very hard, just not always at academics, and Canadian students probably as well.
Sometimes extracurriculars.
Extracurriculars, athletics.
Right.
They put a lot of time in there, or an outside job. So I don't want to say that the North American students are not working hard. They are. They're just not working as hard on academics and intellectual pursuits.
Who's having the most fun?
Well, if fun is the purpose of high school, I would say Americans are probably, and North Americans are having the most fun.
Who's goofing off the most?
I would say North Americans are goofing off the most.
Did they win that one on a landslide?
They're pretty clearly ahead.
Not the one you want to be winning in necessarily. How much more advanced would you say, now that you've had a chance to look at it through this documentary, how much more advanced would you say India's or China's curriculum is compared to, and this is very generic and generalized, I understand, a North American curriculum, if you like?
At the high school level, what I have found is that the Indians and Chinese are 2 to 3 years ahead of the typical Americans in math, physics, chemistry, biology, computer science. We are, I would say, about equal on English, but English for them in China is a second language. In India, it's really a first language. And in world history, I'd say they're about a year ahead of us. Geography, they are 2 to 3 years ahead of us.
Are the Indian and Chinese students, in your view, more motivated than North American students?
They are more motivated for a couple reasons. One, they're motivated, huge portions of their population are in poverty, and they have, education is the way to get out of poverty, so that's a tremendous motivator. But also culturally, most of India is Hindu, and most of China follows, even though they don't have religion there per se, they have Confucian philosophy that's been there for thousands of years. And both of those provide impetus to improve yourself, for high academic achievement, to hold teachers in high regard. So they are more motivated.
I'm told, though, that India has among the highest suicide rates for young people in the world. And I wonder whether the rigors of the education they are so desperately seeking as a means out of poverty is part of the reason for that.
It's interesting because I've talked with the World Health Organization about that, and there actually is very little data on suicide rates in either India or China. Neither country wants to report suicide rates, and I think it's unfair to pin it entirely on pressure for academic achievement. The other pressures they have to deal with, there is a particular study that most people cite about that suicide rate in India. Well, it's in one area of Tamil Nadu where they followed girls, teenage girls. Well, these teenage girls are in poverty. They are forced into sometimes unwanted marriages. Arranged marriages are still the norm in India. And so Every bit of research I've been able to find, there is no definitive report that says suicide rates are any higher in China or India. And in North America, you also have to look at better access to suicide prevention. You have to look at teenage drinking, which is not a problem in India or China. You have to look at drug use. So I think it's unfair to say that there, and we put a lot of pressure in North America on our kids, just not academically. In athletics, we put a ton of pressure on our kids.
Yes, we do, don't we? Yeah, that's a good point, different thing. However, you did interview parents for your movie as well.
Yes, I did.
And I wondered whether you were able to come to a judgment about the parental pressure put on students in China, in India, versus here in North America.
I would say that with the parents that I talk to, they want the best for their children. And in both of those countries, there are hundreds of millions of people living in abject poverty, $1 a day kind of poverty. And so the pressure they put is really out of love and concern for their children, not in North America where we put pressure for them to be successful in hockey or football or baseball. And it's pressure, but it's also, there's a lot of family support. The families are, in the film you'll see, you saw that the families are much more engaged with their children than families in North America.
And I mean, we should point out, the two young students that you chronicle in your movie who are from Indiana, they were hardly slugs. I mean, these were pretty...
Oh, they're very bright.
They were very bright kids. They're both going on to university. They're both doing well.
Yes.
So just for those who may think that you try to sort of slant this documentary to make, quote unquote, them look better than us,
yes,
not the case.
That's a good point, Steve. And actually, Carmel High School in Indiana is in the top 5% of all public high schools in the U.S. academically and athletically. And they have a $30 million football stadium, for example.
Unbelievable.
And both Neil and Brittany, the two students, he was student body president, graduated in the top of his class. She graduated top of her class. He's pursuing computer science. She's pursuing pre-med. I mean, these are high-achieving American students in a high-achieving school.
How is the one-child policy in China affecting all of this?
The one-child policy has a real effect in China. In fact, I talked with parents there. When you have one child, you invest everything in that child. And I think we saw that in the earthquake in China. You know, when they lost their one child, I mean, the families were devastated. And so I had many parents tell me if we didn't have, if we had more than one child, we wouldn't be able to put as much investment into our one child, but they are able to do that.
Let's talk a bit now about what your documentary has called, or at least one of the people you interviewed called, a broken system, particularly in the United States as you described it. We saw the clip off the top, Tim Draper, venture capitalist, saying the American education system, in his view, out and out broken. What in his view is broken about it?
Well, it's not up to world-class standards. And setting aside China and India, for example, if you look at the TIMSS scores and the PISA scores, which are put up by the OECD, which is the math and science achievement in the developed countries, America ranks 25th in math and 30th in science.
We're actually going to show those numbers when we get to the debate later.
Okay. But then when you put India and China in, which don't participate in the OECD because they're not considered developed countries, their academic standards are even higher. And I think what Tim and I were classmates at Harvard Business School. He is a venture capitalist. He's invested all over the globe. He's recently moved $400 million to India to invest in startups. He has money invested in China. I mean, the money is moving to where the brains are, because the brains are creating new companies. And he does not see that our education system, the North American education system, is producing sufficiently highly educated students in math and science to become engineers and scientists, and those are the ones who create new technologies and new products.
Does he think it can be fixed?
Well, I can't speak for him. He served on the California school board. He's poured millions of dollars of his own money trying to fix it. I would say he's a bit pessimistic now. I think it can be fixed across North America. I don't think it's either a prime minister issue or a presidential issue. I think it's more at the community level, at the premier in the provinces, and at the governor level in the states, and that's where leadership has to occur.
Is the West excelling in any aspect of high school education, not including football, where we know they're doing great?
Well, I asked that question of the Indian, I brought the Indian principal and the Chinese principal over to the U.S. They believe we do a better job of instilling creativity and kind of independent thought.
Self-confidence.
And self-confidence.
We're still at the top in
We are number
self-confidence.
one in self-confidence. I'm not sure it's always justified, but I'm not sure that that creativity necessarily comes from the classroom. I think a lot comes from our culture and the things students do outside of school. I would have to say, in all candor, having been in schools in both India and China, in the core academics, and particularly in the hard sciences and math, we aren't even close.
Is the North American approach to education too easy on students?
If you love your child, and you want your child to have a high-paying, successful career in the growth industries of the 21st century, I would say we're too easy on our students.
Are our expectations too low?
Yes.
They can do better.
Yes, they can do better, much better.
But they're not because...
We as parents, I think it's first a parental responsibility. We don't challenge them enough. Our culture, what does our culture reward? When was the last time there was a mathematics Super Bowl broadcast on TV?
Well, they do spelling bee now.
Yeah, on ESPN.
On ESPN, yeah.
But you know, spelling is one thing, but math, chemistry, physics, our culture, the North American culture, is a sports culture. That's what we excel at. That's what we enjoy. That's what we tell our. And when you build a $30 million football stadium at a high school, children aren't stupid. That speaks volumes to them.
About what the priorities are.
When a student on the debate team goes to a competition and the only parents that show up are the parents of the students who are there, they're not stupid. They know the rest of the school doesn't care about debate.
Were you not struck, though, by the Indian and Chinese students who you know, didn't seem like they were having a whole heck of a lot of fun all the time? And some of them were saying they were tired and that they felt very overworked, and they know that their American counterparts are having more fun than they are. I mean, that did strike me as being somewhat, you know, sad.
Well, I'm not sure it's sad. I've spent a couple things. Culturally, they are less expressive emotionally than we are, particularly the Chinese. I just got back from Beijing. I was over at the Olympics. I mean, they just culturally aren't as exuberant as North Americans. So I wouldn't misread their body language and some of their facial expressions as not being happy. And I'm not saying we should be more like them. What I'm saying, and what the film is saying, is that's how the two largest countries in the world are preparing their students for the 21st century.
That's what we're up against.
We can decide, you know, hey, we don't want to play that game, but that has consequences for us economically and has consequences for our children.
That's what I want to finish up on. You have children.
I do.
How old are your children?
2 teenage girls, 16 and 14.
I want to know, in our last minute here, what did your experiences in making this film suggest to you about the kind of education they're getting and whether you're satisfied with it?
Well, we completely changed how they're being educated. They go to a very expensive private school in Memphis, and it is not rigorous enough, in my view, compared to world standards that I have seen. And I've run businesses in Europe, North America, Japan, China, and India. And compared to the people I'm hiring in China and India, it wasn't rigorous enough. So now
Private school is not rigorous enough.
My daughter's school. Now, my daughters used to be year-round competitive swimmers. They spent 4 hours a day, 6 days a week in the pool. They don't do that anymore. They still swim for the high school team because I think team sports are very important. I think they bring a lot of value to young people. But 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, for a year, for 4 years, is not going to help them in their careers. So we had a discussion about it as a family. Now, my daughter this year, she's a junior. She's taking AP Chemistry. She's taking Biology. She's taking Pre-Calculus. She's taking Spanish 3. And
is she happier?
She is happier.
Is her dad happier?
Her dad is much happier. and I'm happier because I feel that I'm doing the best I can to give her the widest array of career options in the 21st century. No, she burned out more on swimming. I mean, she was more tired when she used to swim. So I think it's very important that that the other thing that I did is I hired tutors for the students because I can't teach them AP Chemistry. I mean, I'm just not qualified. And when they are working with someone who is qualified and they start to really understand chemistry or physics or biology in depth, those are fun subjects.
Okay, the documentary is 2 million minutes. People can come to our website if they want to find out more about it, tvo.org. In the meantime, Bob, why don't you join me on the other side of the studio? We'll continue the debate.
All right, very good, thanks.